Good afternoon. In English language arts, we have been looking at a book called Tinstar. Now, I'm going to give you a quick review, or try to give you a quick review of the book so you have an understanding what's going on. The main character, Luke Hadley, he is a guy who has the possession of a Pinkerton star. Okay? And what he does is he is on the search for a gang, the Raleigh Roads gang. Why? Well, you learn in the beginning of the book that he got married to his love of his life, Audrey, and during that wedding, after she said I do, the Raleigh Roads gang came in and started shooting people up and kidnapped her. So he's been looking for her. And I mean, he's been on the hunt, starting at a way station where these stagecoaches come in. He sees this body that's charred. He brings the body to Preston. This is all, by the way, in Kansas. Brings the body to the coroner. He says, nope. This gives his name. It wasn't Audrey. So he goes to the nearby saloon, has a few drinks, but gets a little too many drinks. Has a standoff with a rancher. The rancher gets upset, calls in the sheriff. Next thing you know, he's in jail for the night. So Luke Cadley finds himself meeting a lot of sheriffs and marshals. Well, fortunately, there's this mysterious woman who wants him out. She pays the marshal or sheriff, he gets out. He eventually ends up going to Crossroads. Why? He's looking for a place that the Raleigh Roads gang would want to hit. He's looking at the bank, that they have a solid bank. And that would be a bank that would be a challenge, maybe something they'd like. Well, not too conclusive until Mr. Luke Hadley, out of the corner of his eye, sees Crazy Water Benedict riding his horse into town. He follows Crazy Water Benedict. Water Benedict is part of the Raleigh Roads gang. Follows him into the saloon, tries to pace him head on, but ends up he cries Crazy Water Benedict, talking to another guy named Nelson. Tries to pace Benedict head on, but ends up in a fight with Nelson, and the whole place breaks out in a melee that Hadley and Nelson get arrested for. Water Benedict gets away, gets up in jail. He's upset by the fact that that sweet and mysterious woman finds herself outside his prison cell. She's talking to him, asking him questions, everything. Next thing you know, she comes in, gives the sheriff marshal some money. It turns out she wants Nelson released and not Hadley. He's pretty ticked off. The next day, he has to go over and pay off all the damage for the saloon. But then later on in that day, he finds Nelson over by a diamond store. What does he do? He gets into a shootout with him, finds out more about what's going on with Crazy Water Benedict. Crazy Water Benedict sees Nelson. They give a gunfight. He kills Nelson, and Crazy Water Benedict heads out of town. Hadley ends up in a doctor's office. Eventually, Hadley gets outside of Crossroads. He's out there trying to figure out what happens next. Then this woman he hears started singing. He hears a singing of a woman. Finds this woman named Sarah Youngblood who thinks that he, Luke, is her lost husband who went to war. Not so, but she thinks he is. They go back to her cabin. She talks more and more, talks about a bunch of guys that had a bunch of horses. Aha, the gang. Luke Hadley goes looking for those horses, sees what he thinks is a gang, but what happens? Sarah Youngblood comes looking for him. She gets captured by the gang, and then the camp marshal captures him, throws him in jail. Are you catching up with this stuff? It's going kind of fast, I know. Well, anyway, he's in jail with the marshal, trying to explain that he didn't do anything. Well, next thing you know, that very mysterious woman shows up again, but this time she's got a gun on a plate and gives a gun to Hadley. Gun to Hadley, goes ahead and gets the sheriff, says, let me out of jail, please, right now. He gets out of jail, and they head out. And what happens? He heads out, and he gets out of town. And what happens, he runs into this lady. Well, actually, he goes to a farmhouse. He runs into a farmhouse. Family takes good care of him, sells him a horse. He gets fed nicely, gets a little cleaned up, and he heads back out. Runs into this woman, Marta Shearer. Oh boy, finds out she's a Pinkerton agent. What's going on here? Turns out that Raleigh, what's his name? Hadley's after the Raleigh Roads gang, but so is the Pinkerton people. Why? Because the Raleigh Roads gang held up a train that was being guarded by Pinkertons. 2 Pinkerton agents were killed. What's happening? They admit it's personal for them. They're trying to find the gang themselves. But the thing is, she's real Pinkerton. Turns out his badge that Luke Hadley's been carrying is a fake. She calls him on it. Well, he still keeps on looking. She departs. He keeps riding, runs into these bounty hunters, and they ride together for a little while until finally they think they caught up with Marta, and eventually he catches up with her. That's Luke. They get into a shootout, and that's where we are right now. Did you get all that? Yeah, I know it's a lot. Well, anyway, I'm going to read for a few more minutes, but I'm on chapter 14. Not going to read for very long, but just for a few minutes. Let's read chapter 14, starting in on page 174. A bug trying to crawl up his nose woke Luke. He batted at it, missed, then sneezed, then sent the offending insect sailing. He wiped his nose off on the sleeve, then memories flooded him. He sat up and immediately regretted it. All his weight pressed down on his rear end. Pain shot through his loins and up into his side. Stay flat, you must hurt all over. Felt worse, he said, and he had collecting shrapnel in the chest had been bad. But having Crazy Water Benedict try to murder him, it had been worse. Now there was pain, but not the horrific view of it, man destroying a future. Let me repeat that again. Now there was pain, but not the horrific view of a man destroying a future. Luke eased into his right side and stared at Marta Shearing, yet the real Pinkerton agent. She went about fixing the meal. It didn't smell like much, but Luke's grumbling belly wasn't in the mood for fancy food with French names he couldn't pronounce. Anything he kept down would be the best meal ever. She sat on a low rock, giving him a view of her profile. She wasn't the loveliest woman he'd ever met. That had to be Audrey, but Marta was far from ugly. He saw a few scars on her right cheek. She turned to face him, and he saw the tiny pink lines that showed up on both cheeks. Knives, she said, answering his unspoken question. I get into knife fights a lot. He shook his head. The scars are from something else. She took a deep breath, her breasts rising and falling under her blouse, and the tan duster she wore open in the front. She dished out some of the stew she'd been poking at and brought it to him. He started to use his fingers to eat, but she stopped him. Fishing around in her gear, she found a spoon. Thanks. He took a deep whiff. Smells good. It'll go down better with a couple of these. She popped a pair of biscuits from a pan and dropped them on his plate. He gobbled down the food as if he hadn't eaten in a month of Sundays. When she handed him a second helping, she said, it was my first case working for Alan Pinkerton, and yes, I know him. I've worked with him personally on more than one case. And yes, he's a master of disguises. He taught me how to fade from sight without trying. When I put on a real disguise, I've become someone entirely different. It's hard to add height to disguise. He says, I ought to keep it because I had to get your jeans off you. I can see that would be a chore. He tried not to blush, thinking about it. Sometimes it was better to be unconscious. Then he started to consider what it would be like if he hadn't been shot. And it was quite an undertaking. The way the blood caked into the cloth and glued on the flesh. I looked for a fillet knife, thinking to skin you. It was easier letting you soak in the stream until the dry blood washed away. The smirk on her face irritated him. I'm not used to such treatment. Don't you have any sisters? I've got 4 younger brothers. When Ma got the grip, I had to ride herd on them. The oldest was 10. She turned pensive. Ma died. Paul remarried a year later, but by then I was the woman my brothers looked for everything. That was a burden, but I'm sure you did it well. Are you being sarcastic? Not at all. I can't see you doing anything you're not good at. She snorted and shook her head. You don't know me or you wouldn't say that. And it looks as if I don't mean to getting caught and tortured to spill my guts was a learning experience. She looked mad at herself for revealing even that small detail about herself. Sorry, I promise never to bring it up to anyone. My lips were sealed. Luke worked his way to standing, using the cottonwood for support. He took a tentative step. White pain flashed through him like he'd been hit by lightning. The second step wasn't as bad. In a few minutes, he found the right gait to keep the agony at a minimum. He wasn't going to run any foot races, but walking no longer stymied him. While he practiced walking, she cleaned the plates in the stream and packed away the gear. You up to riding? You got both the horses and the one you rode in on. She snorted again. This time it told him she thought little of the plow horse. He took offense at her attitude. It got me here, and it's the best choice for me getting on. It's got a steady gait and it's gentle. You're not giving on you're not giving up on finding the bank robbers. I need to know what's driving you to so hard to get roads. And Crazy Water Benedict. Luke haltingly relayed his wedding day and how he felt in his gut that Audrey was still alive. You're just saying that to give yourself a reason to find the gang. You want to kill Benedict and Rhodes. If you're honest with yourself, you know they wouldn't have kept your wife alive all these months. Considering the moral character of the gents in that gang, she's better off dead. She's alive, I know it. Do you believe in Pico's Bill too? And the Paul Bunyan's big blue ox? Anger filled him. He began gathering his gear. Strapping on his six-shooter proved uncomfortable until he twisted around so it rode a bit in front. He rested his hand on the left buttock. Marta had done a good job sewing him up, but riding would be the next challenge. Okay. Page 180. Did you take all their clothes? Deke and Zeke, I stripped them down to their long johns and tied them to a tree a dozen yards in that direction. She pointed back toward the clearing where the shallow crater stretched as far as a reminder of the deadly fight there. They'll get free eventually, but without horses and boots, they won't travel too fast. Why do you ask? He showed her by putting on a second pair of jeans. The added padding helped. Folding his shirt and putting it in between him and the saddle acted like a thin pillow. Every move came slowly, but he didn't cry out in pain. He was ready to get back on the trail of the robbers. Well, that's the middle of page 180. And what you got to understand is Luke is determined to find the Raleigh Rhodes gang, and looks like Marta is also interested too. Because remember, it was her Pinkerton agency that got messed around by that gang. And he's trying to find Audrey. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is this. In reading this, what am I understanding about these characters? What is it about Luke that stands out? What kind of person is he? I mean, he says he's in love with Audrey. He wants to find her. He's sure she's still alive. But is there more to this guy than what we're being told? I mean, he loves his wife. We know that. But man, it seems like he keeps on running into one problem after another. And yet he's determined, very determined to have success. Maybe it is real love. We hope it is. But maybe there's something else involved. I'm wondering, did he know the game beforehand? He talked about the fact that he knew the guy in the Civil War. And remember, this is after the Civil War, 1870s Kansas. Okay, that's the time frame. So he knew the guy. In what way? We're going to have to read more to find out. But the more you read, the more you get a better understanding of what it means to give as much description as possible. In any kind of writing, you want to tell the reader as much as you can so that the reader can be a part of what you're talking about. Every reader wants to be a part of the story. That makes the story interesting. And the more you give information, the more you detail it, the more you give an understanding of what's going on, the more the reader will be interested. Thanks for watching.